Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Cedric Lewis, and on behalf of A Life Celebration by Franklin, we're so glad you're here for this month's Grief Symposium. Now, before we begin, we want to for flexibility, and we've integrated more online sessions. Thank everyone for the flexibility as we've integrated more online sessions into our monthly schedule. And yes, we're still meeting in person. And so for those dates and for more information, please make sure that you check out alcbf.com/grief. And also, just a quick reminder to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you don't want to miss any of our future streams and also future grief sessions. So subscribe there and be sure to share this stream with anyone that you know that would benefit. Now, this month's topic is the emotional landscape of grief, and we're honored to be joined by the grief doc herself, Dr. Tonya Cunningham, who is an expert in grief and emotional wellness. And in case you don't know her, she brings years of experience supporting individuals and families through the complexities of loss. So, with that said, make sure you click the link in the video description and get your handout for today's session. And we can get started. So, Dr. Cunningham, hello and welcome back. I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you, Cedric. Thank you so much. Well, hey, everybody. Great Sunday afternoon to you. This is Dr. Tonya Cunningham, known as the Grief Doctor, and we are here for our monthly Grief Symposium that is hosted by a Life Celebration. And for those of you who don't know that, Life Celebration by Franklin is a funeral home. Some people ask me, say, what is that? Sometimes they think it's an event center. Well, actually, it kind of is. Having funerals can be an event. But this is a local funeral home in the Austin, Texas area, and they are providing grief resources for you, not just their family members that they have served, but they are providing this resource to people who are in the area. And now that we are digital, more often, anybody can join us. So we look forward to seeing all of you log in and to share with us. So again, we appreciate you being here. If you haven't done so already, we want you to sign in, and you can go to the website to do that, alcbf.com, to sign in. Why? Because we want to keep in contact with you, and we want to just make sure that you are navigating that space well. So we want you to sign in. And the handout for today is also available. You can look under the description under the video, and you can click on that link and you can go ahead and download the handout that we will review on today. So, before we jump into our material today, I'm always going to ask about those of you who are viewing with us for the very first time. If this is your first time being with us live, or if it's the first time you've actually watched the replay, we want you to put a one in the comment section. A one in the comment section. That indicates that you are a first timer. We want to recognize you and we want to welcome you and continue to have you engage with us each month. So I have the ability to see you guys on Facebook, those of you who comment. But those of you who are on YouTube, go ahead and put your one in the comment section, and our digital team will certainly relay that message to me. Okay. So this is a time, although I am sharing, I'm speaking with you, guess what? It's also a time of engagement. Okay. So feel free, as I'm talking, as I'm sharing, as I'm educating you on this topic called grief, feel free to put your comments in the chat. Okay. Feel free to put your questions in the chat, and I can certainly answer them. I'll see them on Facebook. And if I don't see you on Facebook, again, our digital team will catch it. It's a question, and he will relay that question to me. Okay. He will relay that question to me. So I want to take this time for us to appreciate Barry and Marie for providing this resource. It's a needed resource. It started over 11, 12 years ago, by 11 years ago, and it has been going strong. So it is a needed resource, especially in the times that we are living in. Believe it or not, beloved, a lot of people don't even recognize that they are even experiencing grief. So this is why we're here. Again, providing this resource to educate you. Most people think that grief is about death only. it is not. It is about any type of loss. And a lot of people currently, especially a lot of people in the US and our nation, the United States, a lot of people are experiencing grief because they've lost their jobs. They've lost their security because of the things that's happening within our government. So if that is you, you're in that space, you are in the right place to receive your support. So help me appreciate them. Again, put a heart in the comment section, or give me some hearts on Facebook just to let them know. And Marie is actually watching. She's actually listening. She can't watch because they are not here today. Cedric and I are moving forward today on behalf of the organization because Barry and Marie are actually out of town. They are supporting a fellow funeral director and his family because his son died. And so they are actually away at a funeral. But Marie has let us know that she's listening, talking about commitment, right? That's commitment. She's serving and supporting out of town, but she's also here to support you. We got Michael Penn. Got you. Thank you for putting the hearts on there to help appreciate the Franklins for what they do. So we appreciate that. So let's start with our self-care. Now, those of you who have been with us for quite some time, you already know. Hey, Sheila, good to see you. Thank you for tuning in. Hey, Michael again, Marie. Those of you on Facebook that I'm able to see, thank you so much for logging in. Hey, Nicole, we appreciate you being here. You can definitely like. We appreciate you doing that because sharing is caring, so you can share the broadcast as well. But then you can tag somebody and let them know that we are on. So again, those of you who have been following us, you already know what I'm getting ready to ask you. Before we start our teaching for the day, I'm always going to ask you, what have you done to take care of yourself since we last spoke? It is very important. Self-care is like a new buzzword among many other buzzwords that have now been brought to the forefront since the pandemic. What are some other words? Hello, Arlette. Good to see you. What are some other words that people are now thinking that's new, but it's not? Words like grief, yeah, grief, anxiety, depression, narcissism, and self care. All of these are terms that came to the forefront during the pandemic, and now people are really learning how to take care of themselves. Hey, Ann Moore, good to see you. Good to see you. So we've got some questions already going, Nicole. Our digital team will certainly let me know about that, and we'll address that as soon as we can. So what have you done? Put it in the chat. I see you on Facebook. What have you done? YouTubers, put it in the chat. Let me know. This is a space of accountability. Okay, what have you done? And even if you haven't had the opportunity to do anything, put that in the chat too. Okay, because this journey is individual. We want you to not stress out about not doing homework. Okay, that's not what this is about. The homework assignments we give you is to benefit you, to help you, to give you tools to help you along the way. All right, so y'all put it in the chat. What have you done? What have you done? Okay. Hey, Mike Babers, you say you're an introverted person. You are. Good to see you. Thanks for tuning in. So I always want to start. What I have done. Nicole was honest. She said nothing. Thank you, Nicole, for your honesty. What I've done since I saw you guys last, I went to the doctor. I have a PCP, traditional medicine, that practices traditional medicine, and I have a holistic doctor. And my goal is to move to holistic living in every area of my life. So that's what I'm working towards. So I went to my holistic doctor on Friday, and we had a little come to Jesus meeting. She's a feisty little something. I don't know if she's Italian or whatever, but she's feisty. She lets me have it. But I didn't do good, Nicole. I went, but because I had a recent loss in my life, my brother-in-law died. Yeah, that happened since I saw you last. He died at the top of the month, last month. And so listen to me, I allowed that. Hey, Demetra, good to see you. I allowed grief to derail me. So I started eating trash versus eating clean. And guess what? My body can tell the difference right now. So One of the things that I did for self-care for me is that I went to the holistic doctor, got my encouragement, got my instructions, and now I'm back on track. And I'm really excited about that. I also had my monthly therapy appointment. Now, y'all, let me tell y'all, those of y'all who've been following me, y'all know I've said I've been in therapy definitely since 2020. I was in it several years ago when I went through the divorce, to help me navigate that space of grief due to the divorce. But guess what? I did like most of us, I stopped. Did you know that therapy is not just for when things are going bad, right? Therapy is for when things are going well in your life. A therapist is a person that can help navigate, a counselor can help navigate spaces to help you talk through things. Okay. So I stopped going after the divorce, and then the pandemic came. The pandemic came, turned our world upside down. I was working 7 days a week. During that particular time, I was working a full-time job in hospice as a bereavement coordinator. And then I had this business and ministry of grief. And listen, I was worn out. So that's when I started going to therapy back in 2021. Okay. So I went through 2020, whole 2020, not taking care of myself. Not good. Okay. 2021, I started therapy and I've been going ever since. But last year was the first year since I started therapy that I was consistent, meaning I would go every month without fail. I would do the homework without fail. And guess what? My therapist said he can tell the difference. And I can tell the difference as well. But listen, let me tell you, y'all, my therapy session that I just had, he had me crying. I've been going to him since 21. I'm like, oh my God, I'm crying because we discovered some other things that I needed to address. Okay. So that's what I've done for myself since I saw you guys last. I've gone to my therapy session and I went to my holistic doctor. So I see you guys blowing up on Facebook. I'm going to come over there in just a second. So we have a question by Nicole. Nicole Golden says, how can I help a grieving parent who keeps telling me that what I'm doing isn't enough or it is minor? So, Nicole, I need a little bit more clarity when you said they're not telling you what you're doing is enough. Are they speaking about the care that you are providing isn't enough? Or are they speaking about the grief support that you are providing for yourself isn't enough? Can you put in the comment section? Give me a little bit more clarity about that. And then I will respond to that. Okay, I will respond. So I see you guys on here. Good to see you. Good to see you. Mike, you said again, you're introverted. You like spending time with you. I do too. I like spending time with me. I really do too. I enjoy that. So Sheila Payne on Facebook said that she did a deep tissue massage. Very, very good. Massages are therapeutic for your body. Okay. I want you to think about massages as just what they are, therapy for your body. That's why they call it massage therapy. Okay. So she got that deep tissue, and the importance of getting massages is because it's going to break up the toxins. It's going to help break up all of the toxins and the unhealthy emotions or the unhealthy hormones that's gathered in your body since you've been under grief. So what are those hormones we're talking about? Cortisol, norepinephrine, all of those stress hormones. So a deep tissue massage can help break up all of those stress hormones and cause it to flow out. So good for you, Sheila. I encourage you to do that. I encourage you to do that. Okay. Etta Johnson says she's staying on the journey. Absolutely. Keep doing that. Nicole said, I think everybody should see a therapist. I agree. I agree. All of us need to have some type of accountability. I think every counselor needs a counselor. Every pastor needs a pastor. Yeah, we all need that accountability. I love you too, Mike. Man, I appreciate you for sharing that. Mike says, I just finished radiation therapy treatment last week. Yay! Good for you, Mike. So for you, because you mentioned that you have been through radiation, stress is not your friend. So you have to definitely be intentional to minimize, to almost eliminate stress in your life. So I am glad that you are taking care of you, Mike. So glad. I am so glad. All right. Okay, so Nicole, I see your response. You're referring to the grief support that you're providing them. It isn't enough. They say, I'm not enough. I'm not there enough for them. Okay, so thank you for that question. So, Nicole, I would encourage you to encourage them to get support from someone professional. Okay? Get professional support. And you can definitely be an added support because I think you said it's a parent. Okay? So that means that whoever died is connected to you too, if I'm not mistaken, which means that you're going to have your own grief process. So don't internalize when a parent says you're not doing enough. Now, it's something. I don't know how old your parent is, but it is something when you have to parent your parent. Can anybody relate to that? Oh my gosh. Because as we get older, okay, there's some things that we need help with, and parents don't like getting help. They don't, especially from their adult children, right? So it can be challenging when the parent um, is saying you're not doing enough. So my encouragement to you, and we can talk offline so I can definitely get more information, but number one is not to internalize it. Number two, connect that parent with some grief support, professional grief support that can show them what grief support really looks like. Okay? Hopefully that helps you. It was your partner's son. Okay. Okay, I got it. I got it. So then that means that it's your partner's son. Ask your ask them who's saying you're not doing enough. Ask them what is it that they need. How would they like you to support? The truth is, a lot of people in grief don't know that yet, especially in the beginning stages of grief. They don't know that yet. But thank you so much for sharing that question. I appreciate that. Okay? So let's go to our handout. Let's go to our handout. Today we are talking about the emotional landscape of loss. We are talking about the emotional landscape of loss. So, did anybody ever get to see the movie? It's an animated movie. It's called Inside Out 2, because they had one movie, the first version, and then there's another, Inside Out 2. If you have not seen that movie, I encourage you to do so. Go on Netflix or any of these other platforms to watch it. It's called Inside Out 2, and it's about emotions. And yes, although it is animated, it is not just for kids. It has a great message, and it will help you understand, especially if you're a person that's dealing with anxiety, if you're dealing with anger and those kinds of things. Okay? So today we're talking about the emotional landscape of loss. Because in your grief journey, sometimes you can be judged based upon how you express your emotions. And some people say, oh, you're just too emotional, or you're not emotional enough. Okay, so we're here today to hold space for you to be wherever you are in your grief journey. But we definitely want you to allow yourself to express your emotions and your feelings. Okay, so it talks about understanding grief. I have learned after being in this industry for over 40 years that most people don't understand what grief is. They don't. They don't understand. And when we don't understand something, we cannot navigate it in a healthy way. We cannot properly navigate it. I see Carolyn Bryant Moore is on YouTube. Good to see you. Thanks for joining. So we have to understand grief, and it talks about grief speaking in many ways. It speaks through tears. It speaks through silence. It speaks through memories, and sometimes it even speaks through confusion. So it is very important that you have an understanding that grief is a language that can help us navigate. So once you understand what grief is, then you can understand that, okay, I'm okay. There's nothing wrong with me. A question that I get asked quite often is it normal to feel this way? Is it normal to feel relief after a loved one dies? Absolutely, it is, depending upon your situation, especially if the person that died was sick and they were struggling and in pain. So when they die, it can be a relief because they're not in pain anymore. Or if it was a person that was involved in a domestic violence relationship, and they were the victim in that, and the person that was the abuser, that's the one that died, and the victim can feel relief because they're not being abused anymore. Absolutely. Absolutely. That is normal to feel that. Okay. So I want you to view grief as language spoken through your emotions, and feelings help you understand your inner experiences. You gotta express your emotions and your feelings. Hey, Wiley. Hey, good to see y'all. I see y'all coming in on Facebook. Hey, Sophia. Okay. So, grieving individuals often have deep reflection and sometimes even confusing questions. Like the question I just mentioned earlier. Am I supposed to feel like this? People feel guilty or confused about certain feelings or emotions that they have. Because the truth is, people who don't understand a certain thing, they think that emotions and feelings are the same, and they're not. Emotions and feelings are not the same. Here's the difference, and I want you to understand. Emotions are automatic. They're biological responses, and they are triggered by something externally on the outside of you or something that happens on the inside of you. And guess what? Our emotions originate in our brain and in the limbic system of our brain, especially during the in the amygdala. That's the base of the brain. So our emotions again start there. And guess what? Emotions can happen way before you even have a conscious thought. You can have an emotional response. And let me show you, you can be emotional and you can look just like this on the outside. So that's why some people think they're not emotional because they're like this. But emotions happen on the inside, and they are definitely hardwired by our nervous system, and they are universal across all cultures, based upon how you were raised and what you were taught as it relates to emotions. Some of us were taught, don't you express your emotions. Let me give you a great example of how we teach our children not to express their emotions. When they're younger, this happened to me. When they are younger and they're being disciplined, in my house growing up, it wasn't discipline. It was called a whooping. You got a whooping. I thought my mama was about to kill me. Oh my God. My daddy never had to whip me. All he had to do was look at me and I would straighten up and tears would start falling. But mama would whoop me. I think she would just lose her mind. I swear it was abuse. But listen again, in that, she would whip me and then say, you bet not cry. So you're hitting me and you're telling me not to cry. So when we do that, when children are young, guess what we're teaching them? To hold in their emotions. Okay? So examples of emotions are joy and fear and anger and sadness, surprise, disgust. There is a plethora, a whole gamut of emotions. And this movie that I'm asking you to go see, Inside Out, it talks about the gamut of emotions. Okay? But listen to what feelings are. Wiley say you got a beating. That's exactly what I got. And Monroe say, I'm going to whip the cry out of you. Exactly. That's what we were taught. That's exactly what we were taught. So feelings are the subjective interpretation of the emotions. So this is what your feelings are. Your feelings are the subjective interpretation of the emotion that you just had. And guess what? Your feelings are influenced heavily by your thoughts, by your beliefs, and your past experiences. So when a person says, I feel, you know, or what's the new term that a lot of people say? I was in my feelings when that happened. So when people say they're in their feelings, I think and I move to the clinical part. I'm like, oh, okay. Because the thing about feelings is they can be accurate and then sometimes they can be inaccurate. So we cannot go based upon how we feel because they're influenced by beliefs that we were taught or experiences that we had. And they also, feelings originate in the brain, but they originate in the front part of the brain, the thinking part. Okay? But listen to this. The duration of feelings can last much longer than emotions. So our emotions are shorter in that sense of intensity. They're brief, but your feelings can last a lifetime. Let me give you a good example of that. Last year, I celebrated being out of high school 40 years. 40 years. I know I don't look like it, right? Y'all better say no in the comment section. No, you don't look like it. I've been out of high school 40 years. What? And so we were reaching out to some people to come to the reunion because we're at an age where people are dying. Our parents are dying. Just attended a wake of a classmate whose mom just died, and a lot of the classmates we went there. But not just the parents are dying, we dying. We've had last year we had several classmates to die. Do you know what? Some of the people didn't want to come to the reunion because they said, I don't feel like they like me. I ain't going. I didn't like them in high school and I don't like them now. Here we are, AARP age, and they still holding on to their feelings. Feelings can last a lifetime if you allow it. Okay. So, what are some feelings that we can experience? Love, guilt, and shame, and pride, contentment, resentment. All of these are just examples of feelings that a person can experience. All right. So, let me give you an example of the difference. Emotions. Again, emotions, what happened on the inside of you. Remember that they're instinctive. You don't even have to think about it to have an emotional response. So if you guys were to hear a loud noise like, that hurt my hand. That was a loud noise. And you would just jump. Okay. That's an emotional response. You heard a loud noise. And your instinctive response is to say, oh my God, what was that? That's automatic on the inside of you. All right. But feelings on the other hand, that's a conscious interpretation. So now you heard the loud noise, you jumped in an emotional response, and now your feelings are trying to interpret now what was that noise. If it was thunder, you might feel relieved, but if it was a gunshot, then you might experience and feel anxiety. So that's how emotions and feelings work. Okay. So why am I taking time to talk to y'all about y'all feelings and y'all's emotions? Because it matters in grief and your healing. Some people will remain stuck in their grief because of how they feel. You know, how they feel. And remember, our feelings are directly correlated to or heavily influenced by our culture, our beliefs. Okay. So emotions arise spontaneously, but feelings develop as we process. Keyword is process. Can you put that in the chat? Process. Many of you need to process your emotions, process your feelings. And that's what your brain helps you to do. So understanding the difference helps you to move through the grief with more awareness. You can say, oh, okay, this is a grief response. Okay. Because if you've been here before, I've taught you that our brain doesn't forget anything. Our brain records everything as well as our body. There is a book out there in the clinical world called The Body Keeps Score. Some of you are dealing with pains and aches in your body is because your body remembers the trauma that you experienced when you were a kid. So it keeps score. So feelings develop as we process that loss. Okay? So understanding the difference between the two helps us be more aware and navigate through that space. So let's move on. Talking about grief, I'm on page 3 of the handout for those of you who have it. Grief is not a single emotion, but a complex shifting experience. And it's going to touch every part of your being. Okay? It's going to touch every part of your being. I just shared with you in my last therapy session I just had with my counselor. I left crying because he touched an area of grief that I did not know was unprocessed. Okay? So loss is not an event, it's an experience, and it can definitely reshape our emotional world. Our emotional world. So whether it was the loss of a loved one, loss of a relationship, health, your dreams, grief follows no predictable path. It doesn't. For our new people that are here, I need to share with you that grief never ends. It never ends because it's on the inside of you. It's an internal, emotional, chemical response. Chemical meaning hormonal response. But the pain of grief should end. The pain of grief should end. Okay. So I have lots of clients who are in grief right now because of their jobs. They're working for immigration. Some people have lost their jobs. So they're in grief right now and must process it. So what are some common um, emotions in grief? Now, most people think, I'll start with sadness. Most people think that grief only shows up with sadness. No, a lot of times it shows up through anger. Has anybody ever been angry in grief because a loved one died and any other circumstances surrounded? I know I was. I've had multiple losses. I have that have been significant and close. I buried my mentor, Dr. Spencer. He didn't just die; he was brutally murdered 3 days before my wedding. And the purpose of me sharing that is because he was not just my mentor, my boss at the funeral home when I was a mortician, but he was also my wedding coordinator. He was a jack of all trades, very talented. So I had no idea about the wedding plans because that was his gift to me, being a faithful employee. He wanted to be my wedding coordinator. Well, he got murdered uh, 3 days before my wedding. And so that was a tough loss to process. But I've had his death. Then after that, buried my baby. I got married. We got pregnant, buried my baby. Then my mother died, father died. And then all these people died in the pandemic. But before the pandemic, I went through the divorce. So I've had a bunch of losses, but I've only experienced anger with two. When my baby died, I was very, very angry. At the time, I was a pastor's wife sitting on the front row in church, angry for 2 years, angry. Because at that time, that was back in 2004, and we didn't have grief support. It wasn't as open. It wasn't as welcome. We definitely didn't have it in our churches back then. Grief support was far and few between. So I sat there angry because I didn't have much support. And finally, I found a support group where I could go to get that anger off of me. I was mad at every other woman who had a baby. I couldn't even watch pregnant women. So I was angry with that loss, and then I was angry at my divorce. I was really mad at God about that. Listen, I was mad. So, but those are only two losses that I experienced anger. So it's nothing more than frustration. You at the loss, some of us are frustrated at ourselves. Some people are frustrated even with God. Okay? And it may manifest in resentment. You could ask yourself questions when you're angry, like, why did this happen? Or you just irritable. Anybody been irritable in your grief process? You've been irritable? So sometimes anger stems from feelings of being powerless over the situation. You can't change it. You can't do anything about it. What's another common response is guilt. A common emotional response, guilt. Regret over things being left undone, unsaid. If only start, and you start thinking and you start blaming yourself. Man, I should have called them when they said, they wanted to talk to me. I should have done this. I should have done that. Even when the loss was out of one's control, it was out of your control. Then you start saying, man, guilt is common. Sometimes when it's a spouse that dies or even a child that dies, you feel guilt. That's called survivor's remorse. I have one client who felt that. That was during the pandemic. Her father died of COVID. Her father died of COVID. And she had COVID. And her child had COVID. And that's how her father got exposed to COVID. They lived, he died. So a lot of people who have COVID, they're still alive. They're feeling, they have support groups right today for people like that because they feel guilty that they lived and millions of people died. Okay. Sadness, of course, is a common response in grief. This is deep sorrow, longing for what was lost, and it can show up as crying. You don't have much energy. That's sadness. And then confusion is a common grief response as well. You feel foggy in the head. You forgetful. That's normal. You have what we call grief brain. Grief brain. Okay. So you're confused, you're unsure, you don't know how to move forward. Grief disrupts your normal patterns of thinking, your normal patterns of decision making. So when you go through a significant loss, grief changes who you are. You are not the same person. The biggest mistakes that many people will make, one big mistake is they try to go back to life like it used to be. And you can't. You can't. Okay? Because everything has changed. Even you. Now, change is not bad, but it certainly is uncomfortable, especially when you like what you like, how you like it, when you like it. All right. And then another common response as it relates to an emotional response is going to be relief. I kind of mentioned that already. Sometimes after a prolonged illness, when a person is suffering, we say this a lot when people die, and they were sick, they're not suffering anymore. That's truth. That is truth. Okay. So an illness, toxic relationship, there's relief, but it's mixed with sadness. Even though you're relieved that they're not suffering anymore, you still feel sadness. Okay? So, and that can bring on guilt, but it is a natural, normal response. Natural, normal response. Okay? So, let's move on. Let's talk about mixed feelings in grief and grieving. David Kessler, grief educator in our world in the grief arena, he talks about mixed feelings and grief and grieving. Okay, so people often have mixed feelings in grief, which complicates the process of recovering. Okay, recovering from the pain of grief. And the example that he gives is you may have mixed feelings about grieving the person who mistreated you. Yeah, you out of the relationship, but you're grieving them. You're like, they mistreated me. They abandoned me. They abused me. They neglected me. Why am I having this response? Because grief is about loss. Okay? Doesn't matter if the relationship was estranged. So he says, when the person dies, you get to grieve the parts you love, even if it was a difficult or strained relationship, and even if they could not show up as the person that you needed in your life. You get to grieve the person you needed. That's going to help somebody whose parent was absent, whose father was not in their life, whose mother was not in their life. You have to grieve the person that you needed. Grieve and mourn the idea of the parent that you'll never get now because they're dead. Is that making sense? So maturity again, maturity. When you mature in your grief process, it's when you can have two opposing views and you can hold them together. Okay? Two opposing views and you can hold them together. So it's important for us to not judge your feelings, but allow them to be complicated. Grief is messy and it's sometimes uncomfortable. The challenge I see working with a lot of people is they try to rush the process. Hello. Trying to rush. When is this going to end? They try to control the outcome. Okay? You can't do that. So what I want you guys to do, I want you to start managing your feelings. Can somebody put that in the chat? I got to manage my feelings. I got to manage my feelings. Yes, you do. Some of you may be aware of this term. That's another buzzword of a term that came up during the pandemic is emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence. Many people have low emotional intelligence. What do I mean by that? Emotional intelligence means you're able to manage your emotions as well as others, how others respond to you. You're not easily to blow up because somebody said something that you didn't like. That means you don't know how to manage your emotions. Okay? So you got to be able to do that. Many avoid fully feeling grief because they fear being consumed by it. So falling into the bottomless pit or drowning in it and overwhelmed by it. Thanks, Marie, for putting that in the chat. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate y'all. So many people won't even allow themselves to feel or express those feelings because they're scared. If I open up, if I express my feelings, I'm afraid it's going to take me to a place that I don't want to go. I'm afraid it's going to take me down the rabbit hole. Here's the thing about grief, and another word that I want to reemphasize is depression. When you're in depression, in grief, it doesn't mean that it's necessary clinical depression. Depression is a stage of grief. Kubler-Ross, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross is one of the pioneers in the grief industry. She came up with the stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So I can't tell you the countless people that I work with, and when I tell them, I say, it doesn't mean you're not clinically depressed. You just have the depression that's associated with grief. And they're like, oh, I thought something was wrong with me because I thought I was depressed. Okay? So it is okay to be in that space. So doesn't mean you're going to go down the rabbit hole all the time. You just got to be able to release that control. So express your feelings. You will have to allow room for them to come out to be able to manage them. You got to let them come out. Okay? So what you want to do is seek safe spaces. Seek safe spaces and people for you to share your grief. Now, I often talk about getting a tribe to help you on your grief journey, because everybody can't walk the grief journey with you, although they think they can, especially if they've had a death in their life. Have you heard this before? If you had a loved one die, you know, my mama died too. Well, what's a comment that many people will say? I've sat in the same seat you sitting in. You didn't sit in this seat. No. Even though grief is universal, it's still unique. Okay? So what are some strategies to help you acknowledge and to process your feelings? The very first thing, you got to name your emotions. You got to name them. You got to name them. Instead of saying I feel bad, try identifying the specific emotion. Oh, I feel angry. I feel guilty. Identify. I feel overwhelmed. Why is it important to name it specifically? Because it helps bring clarity and validation to you instead of just saying you feel bad. Instead of just saying you feel bad. Another thing you can do to help you acknowledge and process your feelings is express them. How do you express your feelings? Journaling. Journaling is a big one that many people don't realize the benefit of it. Journaling, I mean writing, not journaling, not digital journaling, because there's a connection between your brain, and your mind, your brain, and your body where the healing takes place. I had one lady say, I don't want to write because it's going to make me feel. That's the whole purpose of journaling, for you to get it out. Okay, journal. You can talk to a trusted friend. Okay, prayer, any creative outlet. If you are creative, you like music, you like poetry, all of those are ways to get it out and help you process your emotions. I like dancing. I was watching a video the other day. It kind of came across my feed, and it was a dance class. And boy, this lady was getting it. She go, and her instructor said, we can look at people and don't have a clue of what people are going through. So evidently this young lady had some hardship in her life. And so her dance instructor, he got up in her face. He said, I need you to dance it out. I need you to dance it out. So all of that emotion, all of her feelings, whatever she was feeling on the inside, boy, she danced it out too. And you could tell that something was going on the inside of her. So you want to express your feelings. What else can you do? You challenge your negative thoughts. You want to challenge your negative thoughts, okay? Guilt and anger often stem from self-blame or regrets. You can ask, would I hold something else to the same standard? Because we have these negative feelings about ourselves. I should have been better. I should have handled this better. I thought I was stronger than I was. Okay? So challenge that negative thought. Challenge that negative thought. Another thing you can do is give yourself grace, because grief is messy. It's all over the place. Some days going to be better than others. There'll be sometimes you'll make it through a day without crying. Then there's some days you can't even get up out of the bed. Give yourself grace. Give yourself grace. Be kind to yourself, and remember that healing is a journey. It's not a deadline. It's not a deadline you got to make. It's a journey. You definitely want to seek support. Seek support. Now, the kind of support is going to be important. I know that in this digital world, we have lots of groups. There are many digital grief support groups and stuff like that. Be careful. Just research to know which group to get in, because a lot of these grief support groups are not facilitated by a professional. It's a big support group, and I get it, of people who are just there sharing and caring, but you can get lost in the loop when there's no facilitator to bring you out and to guide it. Okay? I had one lady whose son died several years ago. He didn't just die. He died by suicide. He took his life, and he shot himself in the family car in front of their church. She's a pastor's wife. Imagine going back to church and crossing that place where your son took his life. And so, of course, her grief was complicated. Emotions and feelings were all over the place. And so she would come to grief support group, but she would also get online. She would get online and found a grief support group for people who were like her son in that same space. And she came out of that space filled with anxiety. Okay. So you got to be careful with the kind of support. Find a safe space. And then lastly, practice some grounding techniques as it relates to techniques. Practice some grounding techniques. Okay. So when you feel overwhelmed in your emotions, try deep breathing. And I encourage you to do that even when you're not in a crisis. Deep breathing, taking moments. We did that, I think, in January. We started out our session with what is called box breathing. Can somebody put that in the chat? BOX breathing. You can go to YouTube and it can show you how to do that box breathing. So that'll keep you grounded. You can do mindfulness. You can put your hand on your heart and just calm you down and do your your deep breathing. Okay, movement, walking, all of those things can help you definitely bring balance. Okay, so even when progress is being made, sometimes you're going to be triggered. What are you triggered by? Because the brain remembers everything. You're triggered by an anniversary. You're triggered by places. You're triggered by smells, songs, unexpected reminders. Okay, all of this can bring your grief up. When I was dealing with my brother-in-law's death and helping my sister process through that, help planning for the funeral. I was wanting to do that, so I really didn't get to lean into the emotion of grief. I was dealing with the business of grief. But while I was dealing with the business of grief, I missed a person who died a year before. My god sister. She died suddenly, December 23. So her death came up while I was dealing with my brother-in-law's death. And the reason it came up is because she was very, very supportive of our family. We had to drive. My sister lives in DeSoto, so we had to drive over there several times during the week. If my god sister was here, this is when grief came up. I said, if my god sister was here, she would drive me over there, no matter how much I needed that. So I was triggered. I was triggered by that. So these grief waves are normal, and they don't mean that healing is not happening. That's what confuses a lot of people, because you're doing well, and then you'll have a triggered moment. People think it's a setback. A setback is when you sit and you don't do anything. You were moving forward, then finally you sit down. That's a setback. But the fact that you're crying or you're experiencing whatever it is and you had a moment, that doesn't mean you had a setback. Okay? So how do you deal with these emotional triggers that we just talked about and these setbacks? First thing you got to do is recognize your trigger. Pay attention to what stirs the intense emotions. Okay, is it a particular date? Is it a memory? Is it a place? Is it an unexpected encounter? Okay, awareness helps to prepare for the moment, especially if it's a date or a place. So like when your loved one's birthday comes up, or your birthday comes up and the loved one is not here, you can kind of prepare for that. And when I say prepare for that, you can decide what you are going to do or not do on that date. Okay, so recognize the triggers, then give yourself permission to feel. You see, we keep saying that. Give yourself permission to feel. Triggers are not setbacks. Can you put that in the chat? Triggers are not setbacks. That's your brain reminding you of what it recorded. Okay, they're not setbacks. They're reminders of the love and the loss. So rather than resisting the triggers, just allow yourself to grieve in a way that feels natural for you. Okay, so what else can you do? How can you manage these emotional triggers and setbacks? Create a coping plan. Did you know you need a plan to navigate this space? Yes, create a coping plan. So if you have or know a significant date or event that's coming up, plan ahead for it. Okay, reach out to a friend, say, hey, I don't know what my emotions are going to be like that day. Can you be with me? Can you go with me to this? I'm going to be a little nervous. I remember when I was going through the divorce, actually I was separated and the divorce had not been final. Then a family member and my now ex-husband's family died. And because, I wanted to support that family member because I was close to him. But I was newly separated and I was nervous and I didn't want to go to that funeral by myself. So what did I do? I got my family to come. I got my friends to come, to go with me, help support me. That was a coping plan. I say, hey, I got to go to this funeral. Do you have time to go with me and just sit with me as I go? Because I didn't know what was going to happen with my emotions once I saw my ex-husband at that time, because it was still new and fresh. All right. So create a coping plan, reframe the experience, reframe it. What do I mean? Instead of viewing triggers as wounds reopening, see them as a continuation of your relationship with what was lost. Okay? Reframe it. Reframe it. Honor the memory rather than fear the pain. Oh, that is good. Honor the memory rather than fear the pain. All right? Honor that memory. Use self-soothing techniques. We talked about those, and then get help if you need it. So if you see, it's a reiteration of some of the same things that you can do. The key thing is you got to do it. You got to do the work. You definitely got to do the work. So it's important for us to know, as I come to my close, as I get ready to land this plane, grief is not about forgetting. It's about learning to carry the love, the memories, and the emotions in a way that allow your life to continue. Okay? People may encourage you to move on. It happened a year ago. Can't you move on? I like to use the terminology moving forward. You're moving forward in your grief, and you're carrying them right along with you if it's a death loss. So they're going to be ups, they're going to be downs, again, but each emotion, whatever it is, again, has a place in the journey. So if you're feeling angry, be angry. Anger is a common emotion. I remember speaking several years ago at the Potter's House for a grief workshop, and it was an elderly man came up to me afterwards in tears. His young 30-year-old daughter at that time, I make 30, 35, had just died the year before. And he said, I'm so angry. And I go to church and the people don't acknowledge my anger and they just want me to pray about it. I'm so glad I came to this workshop so I could learn that my anger is valid. There's nothing wrong with me for feeling that way. I said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Okay. So healing is not about erasing the pain, but about making room for both your sorrow and your hope. That's called integration. So as you start healing in your grief journey, you'll begin to integrate to where if it's a death loss, you'll start remembering the loved one with more love than pain. When you start feeling more love, when you start thinking about them than pain, that's how you're integrating. So homework. Did y'all do your homework from last month? Y'all thought I forgot, didn't you? I didn't forget. I left it for last. I didn't forget. Y'all was supposed to write down an action plan last month. Okay. Our topic last month talks about when grief feels overwhelming, seeking professional help. Okay. If you guys weren't here, go back and watch the replay. You can go on the Facebook page or YouTube page of A Life Celebration by Franklin. Watch the replay. Okay. So you were supposed to write a plan. You were supposed to do one thing, take one small step to support your healing process. One small step. So your homework for today is an activity. Okay. Explore your feelings. Which of these statements have prevented you from expressing your feelings? If you can relate, put it in the chat. Be strong. Suck it up. Ignore your feelings and just push them aside. Just push on through. That's the churchy one. That's the saints. They want you to push on through in prayer. And y'all know me. If y'all know me, I love prayer. I preached this morning. That's why I still got on black. I love God. You don't love God? Oh, let me come back. Listen, grief gave me humor. It changed me. I tickle myself sometimes. What else has caused you to prevent you from expressing your feelings? Don't cry. Your loved one wouldn't want you to cry. How you know? Don't cry. Or man up, or just pray about it. There are many, many more. How many of y'all can relate to some of those things? Were you told some of those things? And if you are, guess what? That can certainly prevent you from feeling and healing. So I want you later on, between now and next month when we meet, take a moment to reflect on all those statements, how they've influenced you. They used to influence me. Last three questions I'm going to ask you, then we're going to go back to Cedric. I want you to ask your questions about yourself, about your feelings. Ask yourself, am I connected or disconnected from my feelings? And if I'm disconnected, how long have I felt this way? That's called dissociation. Many of you are moving in dissociation. What does that mean? You're disconnected from the reality of what is happening. Okay? There are only one or two times where dissociation is healthy. When you have multiple losses, things that you're dealing with. Okay? So you can disconnect at the moment. But when you dissociate, you put that thing on the shelf. But honey, you got to go back and get it off the shelf and deal with that. I want you to ask yourself, do I permit myself to express my feelings? Do you? That's something I had to work hard on because I was taught that strong mentality. So I have to really be intentional. And lastly, ask yourself, am I okay with my current feelings? Am I okay with my current feelings? All right? So that is it for today. We made it through the day. Can y'all believe it? Hey there. Hey, Terry. Good to see you guys. So we're going to turn it back over to Cedric. Thanks so much for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you guys next month.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Cunningham. I just want to say thank you for the reminder. You said, let me go to my notes. You said that grief waves are normal. So
Yes.
it sounds good that as long as we're doing, as you said before, as long as we're doing our homework and we're
Mm-hmm.
doing what we need to do,
Mm-hmm.
and we can do that, that we're healing, that we're moving forward.
That's it.
Right? Okay.
Absolutely.
Cool. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We hope that this session with Dr. Cunningham brought some insight and support on a great journey. Now, remember, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can share this session and one of our many other sessions with anyone who may benefit. And of course, you can watch it as many times as you need to. And if you have any other questions or comments or anything, leave your comments on those videos, and you can always contact us. And if you have any information about upcoming sessions or anything about a life celebration by Franklin, you can always visit alcbf.com. All right, that's it. Thank you so much. Take care, and we'll see you next month.